Yeah, and you can see that car right next to it is, buried in the sand.
I think there's another one even further up.
Well, what's
I
interesting,
thought I saw another one further up.
what's interesting, it
Maybe
looks like
not.
they are clearly clearing a path. You just hope that it's kind of, man, I'll tell you what, it reminds me of snow day where I grew up, right? When you would have a massive snowstorm. If your car was in a really bad spot, they would have to plow, and your car could get buried in snow if your car was in a precarious position. And it looks like that might be the case here with a lot of vehicles that are stuck in sand. But if they're in a bad spot and already stuck in sand, they might get even more buried in sand when the plow comes through. Look at all these cars that are just surrounded.
These are all disabled, totaled cars. And there's a ton of them up and down the streets. Because if there's that much sand, then the water level had to be at least that high, right? And once the water gets in the car, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, especially salt water.
Yeah. So even though they're digging that pickup truck out, unfortunately, it's guaranteed it's totaled. All of those.
Yeah, look at this. So that sand there up at least, 2/3 of the way up those tires. And we have seen some vehicles buried in sand up to, really at the windshield.
Yeah.
It's it's sort of a bit of an unexpected twist with Helene. Eric, you've seen a lot of storms, and Jim, you've been an Eagle for a lot of storms, and it feels like every time we fly Eagle in the aftermath of a hurricane or a tropical storm, we see something different. We were talking earlier about the storm or the boats piled up after Ian in Fort Myers. Have either of you ever seen cars buried in sand like that?
No, and I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot of damage along the coast. Again, I really do believe that when you transport sand to a beach on a normal day, and you've got a deeper beach, right? You've got a couple feet of sand. Oh, you want to make it nice and soft and this and that. That sand is easily movable compared to the packed sand that's already there, right, from nature. And I really believe that that's why we're seeing these cars that are buried in sand, where in other places like, from north of St. Pete Beach into Clearwater Beach and even further to the north, we didn't see that, JB, right? I don't think Eagle 8 saw that either. It just seems like where the sand has been added to the beach is very loose and easily movable with that water.
Jim, you ever seen
I was
anything
thinking
like
the exact same thing. Yeah, I was thinking the exact same thing, that it's very soft sand. It's not that hard packed sand that the beach that's been there a while has. This is freshly fresh sand put down. So it's like you said, it's going to be easily movable.
This is a good locator for people. The Don Cesar in St. Pete Beach, the famous Pink Hotel, right there on the Gulf Coast. And Eagle 8 HD looking at Pass-A-Grill here.
Yeah, I think all this piping right here is part of that renourishment project.
Wow.
Meaning it was covered before this, right?
Yeah. I'm not sure if it's covered or not, but I know it's part of the project.
I remember I remember JB shoveling your car out of snow.
Oh, yeah. It's grueling work because it sometimes you'll feel like you'll get in, a dozen clumps and you'll barely put a dent in it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you see the guys are just like,
oh, look at that roof.
Oh, wow, here's some roof damage in the foreground.
Yeah, so there is some wind damage.
And shoveling is hard work. I mean, it puts stress on you, especially considering the weather. I mean, the feels like temperature is 105 outside. I mean, if you're not drinking water and staying hydrated, you could easily pass out with sunstroke.
I hope everybody down there is taking care of one another, and for people, guys, it's just not as simple as running to your local 7-Eleven to pick up drinks. A lot of this area has seen devastation to the point where things are still, in large part, shut down, inaccessible. Yeah, there perhaps will be some conversations about correlation between beach replenishment and the sand that made its way what appeared to be a couple of football fields inland.
Oh, easily. Yeah.
Onto our roadways, and that cleanup is going to be its own problem. Its own. You noted earlier, Eric, about sand getting everywhere. I mean, folks, you ever go to the beach and sand gets into your car and it gets everywhere, even after you've cleaned yourself off? You think that you've gotten all the sand off of you, and yet somehow you look at the bottom of your car when you get home and there's just sand everywhere. Think of that on an exponential scale beyond comprehension. That's what we're dealing with here, with sand making its way into these neighborhoods and into these communities.
And into people's houses.
Right.
Just another aspect of the cleanup.
Now we're in the St. Pete Beach area, coming up on Sunset Beach.
I mean, luckily we haven't seen nearly as much roof damage in regards to the strong wind.
Yeah, we were noting that earlier, how it's almost a bit shocking that there aren't more rooftops just torn from each structure. We've seen torn rooftops and damaged roofs, but a lot less than what we were expecting. Again, every storm does a different type of damage, and we can point to 5 different storms, and the flights from Eagle will look different all 5 times because each storm has their own characteristics. This one, I've just never seen this much sand come ashore before.
Yeah.
Ever. We've covered storm surge. Okay, not historic storm surge like we've had with the record-breaking storm surge with Helene. However, just this much sand getting pushed onto our streets. And there's a great shot from Jim. I mean, into structures. Look at that.
Yeah, the water recedes, but the sand just stays. I can't remember the last event where we had, a decent amount of surge to where any of that loose sand would have been pushed, even a football field inland, a couple hundred yards. And so that sand that has been loose there for years and years and years and years finally got pushed away from that storm surge. And there it is. You can see it just left behind. It's a shame that the water doesn't take the sand back with it as it recedes, but it doesn't. We wouldn't have beaches if that was the case.
Eagle 8 HD over St. Pete Beach, just south of Treasure Island. And this continues on for, I believe miles? All of this sand displacement?
Up and down the coast. All the way up to Citrus County, all the way up to Cedar Key, all the way into Perry.
I mean, you're right. It's a regional problem. Look at this. Oh, is that? Hey, Jim.
The DeLorean.
That's the DeLorean that we got pictures of. You found it. Look at that.
That's been moved, right? I don't think it was there. I thought it was right up against a house.
I'm not sure.
I wonder if the floodwater actually moved it. I bet it did.
That's pretty mind-boggling. We had received a photo on WFLA.com/reported of a DeLorean stuck in the sand in this area at the Pinellas Beaches. And there it is. Why is this noteworthy for those unfamiliar with the DeLorean? An exceptionally rare vehicle, one that, of course, was the centerpiece of the Back to the Future trilogy, the movies. You don't see too many DeLoreans anymore. Obviously, they only made DeLoreans for a short period of time. And to see one in the middle of, storm aftermath with Hurricane Helene like this, it's bizarre. But especially considering if you have a DeLorean, and it is an exceptionally rare car, you wouldn't want it anywhere close to a Category 4 hurricane. So
there were a couple older cars. It looked like one of those old Rabbits. You remember those? A couple of 80s cars that were in there.
It might have been a car collector here by the beach that just couldn't get their cars out in time. It might be that simple.
Or just didn't realize. I don't know if you remember last week while we were streaming, a friend of mine has a place at Reddington Beach and said, hey, should I move my car? And I called him up. I said, yeah, you got to get it out of there. And he said, well, it's elevated and it hasn't flooded in 20 years. And I said, man, I tell you, I wouldn't take a chance because I'm betting it's going to flood. And he got back to me today and he showed me pictures, unfortunately, and the water was higher than the seats. And he has an SUV.
Here we have some, are those, what are they, Power Crews or dump trucks? I'm trying to see.
Yeah, I think they're Power Crews.
Yeah, it appears to be Power Crews making their way through the area.
The first step is to get the sand off the roads.
That's right.
That's the first step.
We were talking about this Friday, clearing the roads, and then powers too, really. I mean, that's the next step.
And then the step after that is getting those pounds of sand somehow off the side of the road.
But you could see why they've limited the access to these barrier islands to just residents. I mean, can you imagine if just anybody could come out here?
What else are you going to do out there?
I should probably so you got to get the roads clear. Then, of course, there's the humanitarian crisis. You're trying to deal with any potential rescues, anybody that did stay behind, any pet rescues. You're just trying to minimize loss of life, get supplies out to necessary people, get people out of there, and then probably, look, power and everything else that you need to deal with to just begin the initial phase of getting Pinellas County back up on its feet. But this is considerable
you can see
more
this
traffic.
Beach right here is going to need a renourishment project again.
Look at that, yeah.
Look how much of that beach is gone.
This is way more traffic than what we saw on Friday. So there's clearly activities picking up, and it's going to be weeks, months, years potentially, but.
And there's going to be a lot of people and businesses that, mentally it's very draining, and they may just say, hey, I quit. I'm out of here. And, places will be demolished. There'll be a lot of open areas of land. And, a couple of years down the road, like even in Fort Myers Beach right now, you could say, wow, I remember the house that used to be here. I remember the business that used to be here. And, it costs too much to try to rebuild just in case this happens again.
It's just all these piles of sand. Now that the road has been cleared in a lot of different areas, multiple roadways being plowed, almost as if it was a snowstorm.
And the
you have all these piles, right, on the side of the road, creates its own complications because less room for you to put stuff out on the front lawn or the front section of your home.
And look at the road, JB. You can't even. You still can't see the road.
It's just sand.
Yeah, you've got piles of sand on the side of the road. Yet, you hardly see any black asphalt whatsoever because, like I said earlier, it gets in the nooks and crannies. And just like snow, when you plow a road, there's still some snow on the road. It doesn't all come off. Same thing with the sand. Look at that white structure. I mean, sand is just piled all around it.
Yeah, I remember seeing this spot. I believe it was on our Friday flight. I mean, a dock and what appears to be a lift just thoroughly wrecked. I mean, just blown apart. There's that boat. It's still what appears, it's like dangling off that lift.
Yeah.
It looks like it could fall if you
blow on it.
Yep. I mean, it looks like it's about to come down.
And the other boat washed ashore.
There's a boat that's completely out of the water and just sitting over by these balconies.
And look at all the debris around it, too.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is some of the more significant damage just from a debris standpoint that we have seen in all of our flights. That spot got hit pretty hard. Thankfully, it looks like the overpass there, that little bridge is clear.
There's
Look
a
at
boat
that.
on the dock.
Right on the dock.
Yep.
Just kind of pushed onto that dock where it came to a rest, and again, kind of dangling off the side there.
You wonder how high those lifts were. If those boats had been there the whole time, maybe the water level didn't quite reach it. They look pretty high, the ones that are there.
I mean, you got to think that these boats were in the water.
Yes.
I mean, they're elevated off the, off the surface of the water now, but they were in the water during Helene, or in the aftermath during really that initial storm surge.
We got to start heading to Albert Wooded for fuel, and then we'll be back up for the 5 and the 6.
Roger that, Eagle.